evening, everybody. My name is Grant Cameron. I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I have been looking at the WikiLeaks emails related to John Podesta and UFOs, and I'm going to do a webinar here, which will go at least 60 minutes, probably closer to 90 minutes. So if you need to go somewhere, I'm sure someone will put it up, or you'll be able to link to it. Let me just get my screen going here. Okay. Okay. As most people know, WikiLeaks released the John Podesta emails. There are about 50,000 emails according to the WikiLeaks people. This morning I saw there was one that was numbered 43,000. So assuming that they're releasing them chronologically, there's about 7,000 left to come. I'm not going to take questions tonight, but because it'll go on forever. But anybody who has a question, this is my email address, whitehouseuFO@gmail.com, and I'm willing to take any questions that people have. I've posted a lot of this material on my website, blog site, whitehouseuFO@blogspot.ca, and I've produced probably 15 pages plus on what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to go through all this, but I'm going to link it, not just the emails. You'll see the emails, but I'm also going to link it to John Podesta's tweets. Because in order to understand what's going on with these emails, you have to understand what's going on in the background and what John Podesta is actually doing. So the first question is, the WikiLeaks, how accurate are they? I've contacted a number of the people who are mentioned in the WikiLeaks, their emails, because in the emails, all the email addresses are there. I contacted a number of the people. Nobody at all said this was not their email. Everybody said, yes, that was my email. So I'm assuming, based upon what I've seen, that at least the UFO stuff is accurate. It is the actual emails. So they're not faked, but they may not be complete. Whoever hacked these, and we've seen this material. At the very end of the lecture, I'm going to show one particular case where I've been waiting for particular emails to show up that we're pretty sure exist, and they may be the most important emails of them all. John Podesta's emails to Tom DeLonge, which have not appeared yet. So we'll talk about that at the very end, and I'll describe what these emails are and why they may be very important. So we're not too sure that all the emails are there. Some of the emails may have been pulled, but there's a couple that have not appeared that we are expecting answers to emails we already have. Now, I've discussed a lot of this before. I wrote a book 6 months ago called the Clinton UFO Storybook, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight links into that, because in that book I have an entire chapter, and a lot of the book is about John Podesta. And what I say, when you're looking at the Clinton story, John Podesta is a major player in the Clinton story. He was 6.5 years in the Clinton administration. He's been friends with both the Clintons since the early 1990s. And I read an entire chapter in the book, and I call it John Podesta, the Puppet Master. And that's the way you have to look at this, that John Podesta is a political operative. He works behind the scenes. He's like the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain, pulling the strings. You very rarely see him. You very rarely hear him do an interview, but he's very key in the background. And that's why you have to look at his tweets and see what he's up to. And when you see the tweets combined with the emails, you'll realize a little bit better what's actually going on with the emails. This is a tweet that John put out about a week ago, and this is a tweet to Julian Assange, who is behind the WikiLeaks emails, and he basically says, "I'm still standing, and I'm making risotto." So he's a cook. He's very famous for his cooking. He's also famous for jogging 6 miles every day. And John Podesta, to understand John Podesta, he likes to be in the scrap. He really doesn't really mind the heavy hitting. He realizes that's part of politics. he described to a BBC interview that he and his wife like to go through America on the biggest roller coasters, and they like to sit in the front car, and when it goes over the top and goes down, they like to put their hands up. So he's the type of guy who maybe is not enjoying this, but he realizes this is part of the game, having his emails out there and being leaked. And he basically says, I'm still standing, you haven't knocked me down yet. John is very interested in aliens. He's very interested in UFOs. Where he got this obsession from, we don't know. He was known as the X-Files man in the Clinton White House. And he's very much into the whole X-Files and the UFO stuff.
Grant, we don't have sound. Did you click share computer sound?
Hang on. Just, okay, I'll play this again. Okay, I gotta get the video here going. Stop share, okay. Audio options. Hang on. Okay, where is it again, Neil?
Click screen share again and then share computer sound.
Yeah, the payment was boxed from the policy for
shoot. Okay, give it to me again, Neil.
Okay, so go to share screen.
Okay.
And then.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
You
Hang on. So we're gonna replay this video again. This is John talking about a clip that he's very famous for. He always talks about the fact that he wants it opened up. It's the law, and people can handle the truth. So let's go back here. Why is it not going back? Now we're frozen here. Shit.
People, quite frankly, can handle the truth, and we ought to do it because it's the law.
Okay, so John has made this statement a number of times, and what you're going to hear, I'm going to bring up, is the fact that there's an indication that something's coming. There's some sort of disclosure move, partial or whatever, coming. And if you're listening to John Podesta, who has to have as good an information on this as anybody else, he basically says, I think people can handle the truth, which would indicate that it's not going to be the aliens are here to eat us or something like that. I think it's going to be a lot less dramatic. And John has made this statement in the emails and on video a number of times where we can handle the truth. Leslie Kean, John helped Leslie Kean. Leslie Kean, reporter, and wrote a book on UFOs. He has cooperated with Leslie Kean. He did a forward to her book, and he also helped her file a Freedom of Information Act request on a crash at Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. This is Stan Gordon, who provided the vast majority, 99% of the material, to Leslie Kean, which they then turned into an FOIA and filed. So John was part of this effort. I was involved a little bit with this because I worked on the Kecksburg crash, but it was basically Stan Gordon who provided the material. So John helped this FOIA, and they forced it into court, and they didn't get what they wanted, but the judge basically pointed out that he believed that there was something really seriously going on and being held back. Also, Stephen Greer claims that he gave a copy of some briefing material to John Podesta's lawyer, and that John Podesta took it to Barack Obama for a briefing type of material. So Podesta has had these interactions with people in the UFO community behind the scenes, and he's worked quietly, and a number of people claim to have had some contact and help from John Podesta. In terms of the emails, this is what we have, and there's one new UFO, so there's about 67, if you search for UFOs, there's about 67 emails that deal with UFOs. There's another one this morning, 24 emails that deal with Tom DeLonge, who I'll explain in a minute. There's 27 on extraterrestrial, if you search extraterrestrial. There's a lot on Edgar Mitchell, and we'll talk about that near the end of the lecture. And Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, there's 7. And I have been in a lot of contact with Rebecca about an initiative that she was involved with Edgar Mitchell, trying to get a meeting with John Podesta and then hopefully with President Obama. And there are 6 emails that deal with the X-Files. John Podesta, as you would know, is the chairman of the Hillary Clinton campaign. He has the first and the last word on the Hillary Clinton campaign. He is the main player in this thing. He's very, very powerful guy. He is probably the most powerful Democrat in the country, and he was the guy who started the Center for American Progress, which is the big Democratic think tank, which provided, at one story I saw, said 40% of all the high-level people in the Barack Obama administration they came out of Podesta's think tank. So Podesta is basically building the government. He has tremendous power, and he is the chairman for the Hillary Clinton campaign, and you'll see that these emails work into the Hillary Clinton campaign. As I said before, he spent 6.5 years with Bill Clinton. He was famous for cleaning up all the Bill Clinton messes, the Monica Lewinsky mess. He wrote a very critical report on Hillary Clinton on the Travelgate thing. Hillary wouldn't talk to him for a number of years, but he's very loyal to the Clintons, and the Clintons are very loyal to him. And he's a straight shooter who will actually walk right up to Bill or Hillary and straight to their face tell them what the problem is and how to correct it. He's not sensitive about people's feelings. He says what he really means, but he's trustworthy. So he's been there, and he also worked with the Obama administration. And we'll get to this in just a second. Only for a year. He came in December of 2013, and interestingly, he was known as the X-Files man in the Clinton White House. The day after he came into the Obama administration in December of 2013, Barack Obama was giving awards at the Kennedy Center, and he was giving one to Shirley MacLaine, and that's when he made the Area 51 joke about how when I came in, I didn't know anything about Area 51, and I had to ask Shirley MacLaine. This was the day after he hires Podesta. So Podesta spends only a year with Barack Obama, and but he did set up the Barack Obama administration. So most of the people in the Barack Obama administration were vetted by Podesta and basically hired by John Podesta. So he's a very, very powerful guy inside of Washington. These are the two. If you look at the emails, you'll see these are John Podesta's two assistants, Amelia Fisher and Aaron Sepp. And at least Aaron was not very happy. She's got dragged into all these different emails and stuff, and she sort of pointed out, I'm just I'm a mother and I have children, and people don't realize what I'm going through. And so these are the two that you'll see answer a lot of John's emails related to the UFOs. They answer a lot of the emails on everything else, but these are two of the main assistants, and they are high-level people. I believe Amelia Fisher was assistant to John Podesta when he was at the White House, and they both spent some time at the Center for American Progress. So they're powerful in their own rights. This is Tom DeLonge. We're going to talk about Tom DeLonge. And Tom DeLonge says to Jimmy Church, he said, I made a phone call, and I had a conversation with the president. We don't know what he talked about, but in one of his tweets, he said, yes, the president and I discussed unidentified aerial phenomena. Terry Mansfield's a very important player when it comes to the emails dealing with Edgar Mitchell. But she starts the emails. There's a couple of emails dealing with UFOs back in 2008 when Barack Obama comes in, when the election is won. But basically, the emails were concerned with All Start about this time, the October the 1st, 2014. And this is a Vatican email, and it's sent by Terry Mansfield. And she's writing on behalf of Edgar Mitchell. So you'll see all these emails. I think there's 17, 18 emails from Edgar Mitchell, but none of them are written by Edgar Mitchell. They're written on his behalf. He approves these things, but it's basically Terry Mansfield and Rebecca Hardcastle-Wright who are working for Edgar Mitchell, and they are trying to get a meeting with John Podesta and Edgar Mitchell. And then they're trying to get a meeting with Edgar Mitchell and the President of the United States on UFOs. And this is the email that basically starts it. It's a Vatican email. It's very, very interesting, from 2014. And it says, Edgar Mitchell asked that I write to Mr. Podesta and asked that you requesting his meeting in Washington, D.C. with John to discuss disclosure and zero-point energy. And in the second, and these are my underlined. These are not underlined in the email. This is mine, just highlighting what the important parts are to watch. He said attending the meeting will be Dr. Mitchell, with Mr. Mitchell, will be the following: Dr. Dan Hill, Catholic philanthropist; Dr. Michael Mansfield, Catholic retired Air Force colonel; and Mrs. Terry Mansfield, Catholic consultant. So they're going to bring these people, and they're going to have this meeting with John Podesta. And John Podesta has a Catholic background. So they say, because of his own background as a Catholic, we feel it is imperative that John be aware of the Vatican's interest in extraterrestrial intelligence and in sustainability for our planet. Now, they mentioned two Vatican people here from the observatory in Arizona. And the interesting part of that, and they talk about how they speak very glowingly of the connection to ETs, and they're not afraid of the subject. And the reason I underlined this is that one of the people, you can hear about this disclosure effort that I'm going to talk about. One of the people that's involved in this disclosure effort, and there's a lot of people, there could be 20 or 30 people, there's a lot of people that are involved in this thing. And one of them actually got an invite to the observatory in Arizona. And I'm not sure whether they were meeting with these two guys, but the people in the observatory in Arizona are very interested in the connection to extraterrestrial intelligence. The connection to the Vatican is also very important because if you remember back in 1977, Danny Sheehan, who was the counsel to the Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C., actually wrote a letter to his friend who ran the Vatican Library asking for all the UFO files at the Vatican Library and was denied access. And then the second letter that he wrote, he was working on a paper that was being produced for President Jimmy Carter on UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligence. The second letter he wrote was on behalf of the President of the United States. We are requesting the files from the Vatican Library on UFOs. And for a second time, he was actually turned down on that request. So the Vatican has had this long sort of tie-in with the presidents. Here's a letter, and everything's going to circle around an email that's done in a tweet that's done in February of 2015. And this is done a month before that tweet, that famous tweet. And this is, again, Terry Mansfield writing to John Podesta. She says, as 2014 unfolds, I understand you are leaving the administration in February. And he does leave the Barack Obama administration on February the 14th, 2015. So Edgar Mitchell, this is being written on behalf of Edgar Mitchell, they already know that Podesta's leaving. It is urgent that we agree on a date and a time to discuss disclosure and zero-point energy at your earliest availability after your departure. Now, there are, as you saw with the October 2014, they tried to set up a meeting with Podesta while he was in the White House. And in the end of the story is, as far as I know, no meeting ever took place, but you will see piles and piles of times are exchanged that this almost took place, that this meeting took place. This wasn't that John was evading the meeting, it's just that Edgar was sick and the meeting never took place. But this is a month before and they're trying to set up this meeting. And then there's this interesting thing where Edgar Mitchell says, I met with President Obama's Honolulu childhood friend, U.S. Ambassador Pamela Hamamoto, on July the 4th at the U.S. mission in Geneva when I was able to tell her briefly about zero-point energy. So these emails coming from Edgar Mitchell are actually going to bring her in, and she's going to act as a part of this disclosure effort, that they talked to her about this, and they wanted to bring her into this, this effort to get disclosure from the Barack Obama administration. Again, Terry Mansfield, here's an email after John leaves the White House, or the Barack Obama administration. They now make their pitch again. Now that you are no longer serving in the White House, I write to you and Aaron, who was the assistant to John Podesta, requesting our face-to-face meeting to discuss zero-point energy and disclosure. And you basically see that they're talking about this contiguous universe, which has been a lot of discussion about. But the people like Terry Mansfield and they're sort of, I guess, got overwhelmed by the attention that they've gotten, and they aren't really answering questions. So I did ask, but I think I know what it means, but we'll leave it to them to discuss exactly what that word means. But this was in most of the emails talking about the non-violent contiguous universe, ETIs. This is the crux of the whole lecture. This is John Podesta's famous tweet, which took place on February the 13th, 2015. Everything is explainable when you start looking at John Podesta's tweets, and you start to see how these emails fit in and what happens when these emails are sent. This is one of the most important things that ever happened, and I'll read it, and then I'll sort of explain to you. And when you read a John Podesta tweet or something that he writes, you got to read it about 4 or 5 times, because it means always a lot more than it does on first glance. He said, "Finally, my biggest failure of 2014. You have to remember, he was only in the Barack Obama administration for 2014, plus a month on either side of it. The entire career. So he's saying my entire time of 2014, once again, not securing the disclosure of the UFO files. Now, what's important here is he said once again, which means he tried it with Obama. He couldn't do it. But once again, he tried it with Bill Clinton. He tried to get Bill to disclose. And he said, now again, I tried it with Obama. He's laying the record out. I tried with Obama. I couldn't get disclosure. And then he copies Marie Dowd. You see at the bottom, New York Times Dowd. And I didn't really realize this until Steve Bassett and I talked about this, and he mentioned that Marie Dowd had been copied on the email, on the tweet. I had no idea for almost a year why Marie Dowd had been copied, because she's with the New York Times. The New York Times is not noted as a pro-UFO newspaper. And what we found out later was that Marie Dowd had actually written an article in 1997 after the U.S. Air Force. Bill Clinton forced a review of the Roswell crash, and there was 2 reports done, one in 1995, one in 1997. The second one in 1997 basically said that we were dropping crash test dummies in 1953, and that's why people misunderstood that they thought they saw gray 4-foot aliens in 1947. And Marie Dowd actually writes an article in the opinion page at the New York Times and said, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. This actually indicates that this is for real, that Roswell's for real. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard." And that's why John Podesta copies Marie Dowd, because Marie Dowd is pro-UFO. She's buying this thing. And even though the New York Times is not doing articles, one of their main reporters is in John Podesta's camp. And we didn't realize this for a whole year, why he'd copied Marie Dowd. Now you know. So Steve and I talked about this, and we both realized that this was a significant event. There was an article done that talked about this, and Steve had the same opinion I had. This is a Washington Post article, and Steve said, you don't just send that out. It means something, and that's important. John Podesta does not tweet very much. He only tweets at occasional times, and when he tweets, it means something. And then this was not a random thing that John just decided to do. This was the beginning, and you'll see, this was the beginning of a plan by John Podesta to get some sort of UFO disclosure. This is Steve talking about his encounter with John Podesta. He said, "I've corresponded with Podesta for 10 years, and I've never gotten a response." Bassett told the NBC News. There's like a chess game going on between the Paradigm Research Group and the Clinton team. And we see, once John does this tweet, we start to see these emails appear. And one of them is, of course, from Steve Bassett. And Steve Bassett simply writes after the tweet, he said, "Isn't it time for you and I to have a private, off-the-record meeting?" And he doesn't get a reply. But he basically says to John, "I know what you're doing, and it's time that you and I sit and talk about disclosure." John doesn't reply. Later in the year, in 2015, John actually writes about the Clintons, and he would turn out to be right. He said, "Whatever the future holds for Mrs. Clinton, at this time, she very much needs a major change of subject. The media is very close to breaking the Clinton-ET connection wide open. With that in mind, the equation would seem simple. Wait for the media to arrive and be dragged into the truth process on this ET issue, thus reinforcing on a massive scale the meme that plagues her, or preempt the media and proactively speak to the issue, or perhaps transform the meme overnight." And that's what John is actually doing, as you'll see. He's actually starting this movement where Hillary is actually going to do some sort of disclosure. She's going to do some sort of thing, as you'll see from what's happened and from the emails. One of the other emails that arrives after John Podesta makes this famous tweet is from a member of the parliament in India. And he writes, he said, "I didn't know about your fascination with UFOs. All the best in your new avatar." So this is actually a guy in parliament in India, friends with John Podesta, who basically emails him sort of congratulating him on this tweet. This is one of the more interesting ones. John puts out the tweet in February of 2015, and this guy, Bob Fish, he wrote this book called Hornet Plus 3. It's the story of the Apollo 11 recovery. And he writes a letter first to Leslie Kean. She does not reply. So then he sends 3 emails to John Podesta after John makes this tweet. In the first one, he says, "Based upon significant personal experience, I can attest that UFO hunters are looking in the wrong places." And then he says, "Within the US, this information has existed for many years and is still available today if one knows where to look and what to look for." Now, he sent it to Leslie. She didn't reply. And John actually forwards these to Leslie Kean, and you'll see Leslie Kean's response in a minute. In the second email, it's even more dramatic. He starts to open up about what he's talking about. In the second one, he said, "On occasion, I had lunch with a few of them in the cafeteria." He's talking about people that he's encountered in whatever job he's doing, of a highly classified organization in El Segundo, California. No one could get into the cafeteria without top secret special compartmentalized information clearance. So this was not a lightweight group of gossipers. Of these times, a member of that group was really excited. He said they'd picked up a fast walker. I assumed the same day. He described how it entered our atmosphere from deep space. Actually, and then he said, and zipped by a DSP satellite pretty close on its way to Earth. Not only was it going very fast, but it made a 30-degree course correction, which means it did not have ballistic free fall re-entry trajectory that a meteorite have. So it was some sort of control, whether it was manned or just robotic, there's no way to tell. So he opens up about what he's hearing in classified channels. He's talking to John Podesta about this. And then he writes the third one. In the third email to John Podesta, he said, in that same top secret SCI building, I had lunch with a senior U.S. Air Force NCO who had worked for Project Blue Book in the 1970s. He was an ELINT technician, electronic intelligence, who flew RC-135s from MacDill Air Force Base in Florida. The normal target was Cuba, where they did lots of snooping and sometimes challenging Cubans to turn on radar and other systems. He said there were times when they were diverted from these missions to track UFOs off the east coast of Florida. His claim was that the UFOs had a landing and a takeoff spot in the ocean east of Miami, north of Bermuda. He also claimed there was a specific electronic signature frequency emanating from them when they were going or coming out of the water, so they were easy to track. On several occasions, they filmed the UFO as it transitioned from water to air or vice versa. The last item he occasionally assigned, on one item he occasionally assigned to fly in a U.S. Air Force, and he goes on. But basically, here's a guy who wrote the book on the recovery of Apollo 11, who basically starts to open up to John Podesta, and realizing John Podesta is sensitive to UFOs, sympathetic to UFOs, and he starts releasing this material. Now, John forwards it to Leslie Kean, and in the email, at the bottom, you'll see John Podesta writes, "For your eyes." He sends it to Leslie Kean, and Leslie Kean replies immediately. She doesn't reply to him, but she replies to John immediately. And what Leslie Kean says to John Podesta is another confirmation of yet more documents kept secret from the public. This knowledge belongs to the people under the law. We can get the ball rolling during this transition period, because John has just left the Obama administration. Perhaps a quiet meeting with the right people before your next assignment, ? I already have a perfect briefing package and a highly qualified staffer ready to go. The timing seems ideal. Now, we have not seen a reply back from John Podesta. We don't know if he did reply or whether the email has been pulled, but this is one of the ones where there may be a reply where John either turns down the meeting or agrees to this meeting that Leslie Kean is proposing to have. And you got to remember, at this point, John has left the Obama administration, and he's now the chairman of the Hillary Clinton 2016 presidential campaign. This goes to July of 2015. This is the whole story, very important story. There are two main stories in the WikiLeaks emails. One deals with the Edgar Mitchell emails, and one deals with the Tom DeLonge emails. Tom DeLonge is a famous rock musician, and he gets the idea that he's going to go to high-level officials in the U.S. government, and he's going to get the truth out. He believes that he can take the truth, he can get the story out to the young people, that people can't get the story out. So he contacts a number of people, and then he contacts John Podesta. And he, as you'll see at the end, John agrees after 2 months delay to play the game, that he's going to go along. And there's no doubt what Tom DeLonge is doing. Tom DeLonge's effort is straight UFO disclosure. He wants this out. He wants as much of the material out as possible. And John has agreed to play. So John tells him to fly to Washington, D.C. This is important. And these are the emails we're missing. Is John Podesta saying, I'm ready to play the game. This is an important subject, and I need you to come to Washington. They go to Washington, and this is the interview that was done with John Podesta in Washington. And it happens in late July 2015. And you'll see here's Tom DeLonge on the left, John Podesta on the right. And here are the questions. This is extremely important. Before John Podesta did the interview, they sent John Podesta the questions for the interview. And this is very, very important. This is a book that was written called With the Stroke of a Pen. And it's written by Kenneth Mayer, who's a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he writes a book on executive orders. I have made a number of lectures on does the president know? And this is the ultimate question that John Podesta actually gets asked in this interview. And you'll see the question in a second. But when I lecture on it, I say there are 5 constitutional reasons to know that the President of the United States is running the cover-up. There is no evil cabal. There's no Wizard of Oz. There is no David Rockefeller and his buddies from Europe running the show. The President is running the entire cover-up. And the whole key comes down to the number one reason. There's 5 reasons, but the number one reason is that all UFO secrecy, all UFO classification is run by executive order. All security, it doesn't matter UFO or anything else, all security, all classification is run by executive order. It's not run by law. It was started in 1940 by President Roosevelt, and President Roosevelt started an executive order which set up secret and confidential to protect the secrets of World War II, the technologies. And each president from Roosevelt on has added a brick to the wall, and they've built this wall of security based upon executive orders, not on law. The president runs the show. And basically what the stroke of a pen means is that if the president builds the wall brick by brick, the president can actually take the wall down with one stroke of a pen. And the importance of John Podesta is John Podesta was in the Clinton administration, and John Podesta helped Bill Clinton on 3 occasions with a stroke of a pen declassified piles of stuff. 1994, with a stroke of a pen, one executive order, Bill Clinton declassified 15% of all the material in the National Archives. He just said all World War II records are declassified, and it was all declassified. In 1995, the famous executive order that said anything over 25 years by the US government has to be declassified unless you fall under one of 6 exemptions. Otherwise, it has to be declassified. And that executive order in 1995 that Podesta helped draft has declassified, according to estimates, over 1 billion pages of material since 1995. In 1996, with one stroke of a pen, with an executive order, Bill Clinton declassified, opened up all the satellite photographs from Corona and a number of other spy satellites. It was done with one stroke of a pen. So this is basically what it comes down to is, does the president run the show? Is it run by the president, or is it run by somebody else? So here's the question. One of the questions that is sent to John Podesta by the film team from Tom DeLonge. Kenneth Mayer, the guy who writes the book, said, "What is especially striking about debates over classification and secrecy is that the presidents have asserted almost complete control over the institutions and processes that produce and protect secret information. In practice, classification remains an outpost of almost absolute exclusive prerogative. And that's what I'm saying. The president is running the show. The president is the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. So he says to John Podesta, the question is, do you agree with this statement? If so, what can be done to lessen the president's dependency on secrets and classification within executive programs? If not, who is responsible for the proliferation of secrets within the U.S. government? So that's one of the questions. Some of the other questions that were asked, it was this one. State secrets have proliferated far beyond the government's current ability to review and clear them for release. What can be done to reduce the creation and dependency on classified documents in future administrations? What can be done to increase our ability to process the massive amounts of sensitive data, much of which was born secret and was never reviewed prior to classification? That is one of the questions that John Podesta was going to be facing in this interview. Here's the UFO questions, direct UFO questions that came. In your opinion, are the files having to do with UFO investigations being kept classified, and who gains by continuing to keep these files classified? Then the last question, if you were to create a set of guidelines or a group to handle the declassification of UFO-related information and material, how would you go about it? Now, we really don't know well, I'll get that in a minute. When John gets these things, what is interesting to note that of all the emails, the UFO-related emails, the only time that John Podesta copies somebody else on these emails is when he gets these questions, these UFO questions. And these are the people that he copies. And he basically sends it to these people. One is Jennifer from the communication for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Then there's Daniela for communications and strategy at the Center for American Progress, which is the big think tank. Then there's Sarah Latham, the chief of staff of the chairman of the Hillary Clinton campaign. And then the two last ones are important. They're both at the Center for American Progress that, as I said, provided the huge number of high-level officials in the Barack Obama administration. The one guy, Ken Good, is an expert on civil liberties. And this Ian Millhiser is on government efficiency and transparency. So John, especially the last two, he sends to his assistant, he said, send it to Ken, send it to Ian, send these questions to them. And so what he's basically doing is he's floating these questions to people who are experts on the subject, which indicates that these people know something about this. They have experts on how to answer these questions, what the constitutional issues are, how to deal with it, or it may mean that the Center for American Progress is actually doing a study that John Podesta, because he was very interested and used to run the Institute, founded the Institute, that they may actually be doing a study on if you were to disclose the UFO story, how would you do it? You'd put it through a think tank. Well, he's got the think tank, and it indicates that these two guys may actually be working on some sort of project where they're planning how to do this. And so this is the only time that John copies people, is when he gets these UFO questions from Tom DeLonge. Now, here's the interview. Tom DeLonge has put out a trailer for the documentary. Now, the documentary has not been released, but he gives a couple of little hints. Here's 3 little clips of John Podesta sort of answering these questions, but we don't know what's in the interview. It's just his little teaser of John Podesta talking in this Secret Machines documentary. Here's John talking about the Pentagon and what happens in the Pentagon.
The Pentagon has special access programs deep in the bowels of the Pentagon bureaucracy. Little sunlight emanates from there.
And then because he's a lawyer and because he knows the issues, and you'll always see he delays. When he does something, he always delays. He doesn't make immediate responses. He's very careful to think it out before. And so you see the second thing about how John thinks.
You have to start by knowing what's the right question.
What's the right question? So you think about it before you do it, and analyze the problem and make sure you know what it is you're actually trying to answer. And here's the third one where he talks about the Pentagon budget.
The Pentagon has a $600 billion budget. It's hard to keep track of everything.
So it'll be interesting to see Tom DeLonge's documentary when it comes out, and what John said in length. This is just a little teaser that he puts out, sort of advertising this documentary. Now, after the documentary filming was done in Washington in July of 2015, Tom DeLonge writes an email on August the 1st, and he says, and he's talking to Aaron, the assistant, and he said, John mentioned he wanted to know more about my continued effort with my sensitive meetings on my project. Now, the project is clearly UFO disclosure. He has these people who we'll identify in a second. He has these people, and John has said he would like to be updated on what's going on with these high-level officials that DeLonge is dealing with. And this is another one that we don't have an answer to this. We haven't seen any answer coming back from Podesta, which may mean that he didn't answer this email, or that he phoned him, or that the email is missing. But we have not seen that yet, and we're waiting possibly for an answer to this email back to Tom DeLonge. This is the second important tweet. You have the first one where Podesta tweets, my biggest disappointment of the Obama administration was I didn't get disclosure. This is the one where Steve Bassett and I said, he's up to something. Something's going on. John Podesta he doesn't tweet very often. He's up to something. And this was known as the Lena Dunham interview. It was done on September 29th, 2015. Hillary does a video interview with Lena Dunham, who's an actress and a producer in Hollywood. She's actually now campaigning for Hillary Clinton. And after the interview, John tweets this. He said, "Great interview, Lena Dunham, but Lena, next time, and ask her about the aliens next time." And what I say, I don't care what anybody says, John Podesta is a campaign manager. He's a guy who thinks everything out. And the way the campaigns are run, the Hillary Clinton campaign is run, is you use focus groups. And every issue you have, you put it in front of the focus group. And you watch the monitor. And if the focus group thinks it's a bad idea, you don't talk about it. If the focus group thinks it's a good idea, you talk about it. Which means he put this in front of a focus group. He put the idea about ETs, about what extraterrestrials, about disclosure, and it came out okay. John Podesta would never have done this tweet if it had been a negative issue. Because if Hillary had suddenly dropped 20 points in the polls, John Podesta, who spent his entire life building an institute and thinking things through, would have gone down in history as the stupidest man that ever lived, that he ruined the Hillary Clinton campaign by bringing up aliens. So he had to have known that this was going to not backfire on Hillary. And that's exactly what's happened. Donald Trump has not picked it up. Bernie Sanders did not pick it up. Nobody has really attacked her. It has gotten fairly good coverage, even from the media. It wasn't like Dennis Kucinich in 2008, where once he said he'd seen a UFO, his campaign was over. He was always known as the crazy guy who saw the UFO. But in this situation, John sets this up. And the other thing that it's important to realize is that John is the one setting it up. And what happens is Hillary has never brought up the subject, ever. She's answered the question 3 times on this campaign, twice in the 2008 campaign, she's answered the UFO question. She has never brought it up. And that seems to be part of the plan, that she can only answer questions, she cannot bring up the subject. But she's very open. And every time, the 5 times that I know that she's been asked the UFO question, she's been very open. She's talked about the Rockefeller Initiative. She's talked about different stuff. She has not evaded the subject. She's just not been asked very much. So John sets this up, and it's John setting it up. So every time it comes up, Hillary will say, "I'm doing this for John." So the onus falls on John. It's not Hillary Clinton thinking this up. This is John Podesta's issue, and the weight is off Hillary Clinton from talking about it. And she said, "I'm just in favor of open government. I'm doing this for John." So John takes the heat for the UFO thing, and he's the guy that sets this thing up. And this is a very important tweet, and a lot of emails start right after this. But when Steve Bassett and I talked about this, we knew for sure he's doing something. There's no way when you're running a campaign, you want someone to talk about aliens unless you want to use this. There's something going on. So you remember, this is September 29th when John Podesta puts this tweet out. Remember the date, September 29th, he puts out the tweet. Now he starts getting emails again. Now this is Jim. He's one of the top lobbyists in Washington, D.C. He's a lobbyist that helps the president move stuff through Congress. And he basically writes John after he sees this tweet. He says, "You are now legitimately famous. One of my favorite programs on 116 quoted you as trying to get to the bottom of UFO reports, but that the CIA had frozen out the Clinton administration." That's dramatic. But John Podesta's response is even more dramatic. This is what John Podesta says. Remember, this is after the tweet. This is what John Podesta says. More to come. He's basically, again, warning, more to come. He's thinking something's going, and he's planning something. So September 29th, they do the Lena Dunham interview, and Hillary goes on the Kimmel Show on November the 5th. So this is almost like 6 weeks later, and they're expecting the UFO question. This is shown, is one of the most important emails. It is shown that they are actually expecting her to get the UFO question. He doesn't ask the question. He doesn't ask the question. The clip that has become famous, which I'm going to show in a minute, was actually done in March of 2016. So she has to wait 5 months for him to ask the question. Now, in this, what you have is she's waiting for the question. She doesn't get the question. And you have this Christina. Now, Christina is a special aide to the Clinton administration. She's the woman who actually remade Michelle Obama. After the Obamas took the White House, Michelle didn't have a very good reputation, and she cleaned up her image. She created Michelle Obama's image, and so they brought her in to do the same thing with Hillary Clinton, to recreate Hillary Clinton, to give her a positive image in the media. And so this is what she writes. She's writing to John Podesta an email, and she's talking about the night before. This is on November the 6th email. She's talking about the night before, November the 5th, and she's talking about Hillary being on the show. She was charming, got lots of laughs, and worked in a lot of message. And it's important to realize this part of a lot of message is that there's a memo that actually from the Clinton campaign, which shows that the Clinton campaign used soft shows like Oprah, Ellen, Kimmel to get important policy issues out, that this was part of what they were doing. So she got in a lot of message, including climate change. He didn't end up asking her about UFOs, exclamation mark. She was very disappointed. She practiced UAPs for 5 minutes beforehand. Now, when you see the clip, we're going to show the clip again. Now you got to remember to see the clip and realize that Hillary Clinton has practiced this. If you remember when she was practicing for the Donald Trump debates, John Podesta would stand on a chair and he would yell and scream at her and accuse her of different things. And they tried to rattle her for 7 hours a day. She would practice. That's how Hillary Clinton does it. She practices the answers. And so she was expecting the UFO answer. And so she doesn't get it till March. But when you see the clip from Hillary Clinton and realize that she's actually practiced the answer, then it becomes very, very important, because what happens is in that interview, she gets asked what I call the $64,000 question. And you'll see this. And the $64,000 question was asked of Bill Clinton. And he said to Bill Clinton, when he was on the Kimmel Show, he said, okay, if I was the president, I would run out and I would, if I got sworn in, I'd be heading to the White House to see what the UFOs. And what did you do when you got elected? And he said, well, I knew there would be a gazillion questions, and I got all the Roswell files together and I read them, and I don't think there was, a UFO. And I tried, and I'm embarrassed. I really tried to get something. And Bill would tell the two sides of the story. He'd say, I got the Roswell records, and then he would say I couldn't get anything. So you either got the Roswell records and read them, or you didn't get anything. And he would play this thing, I don't know what's going on. I'm just a puppet. I don't control the UFO thing. I'm probably not the first president they've kept in the dark, or the bureaucrats have tried to wait out. And so then Barack Obama comes on the show before Hillary, and Barack Obama is asked the same question, $64,000 question. Does the president run the show? What did you discover? Did you find out about the UFOs? And so there was a review done by Ben Hansen. He does a review of the Clinton one, but he also does a review of the interview with Barack Obama. And on that interview, he's watching on high-def camera Barack Obama's lapel pin. And when he's asked that question, when you went to the White House, what did you do? At that point, Barack Obama is breathing 42 times a minute. He's hyperventilating. He's petrified. And there's a guy that's been in office for like 6 or 7 years already, and he's petrified at this question. And he says, I can't reveal anything, which is Barack Obama. Barack Obama has never denied the thing. He's just walked around the question. He's made jokes out of it, but he's never lied. Bill Clinton just seems to, say, no, it didn't happen. Barack Obama doesn't deny that he knows what's going on. He just says, I can't reveal anything. So now we're going to show the Hillary Clinton clip and take a look at how confident she is. When she gets asked a $64,000 question, they say, I had your husband on here, Bill Clinton, and he said he couldn't find anything. So what about you? Take a look at how confident she is. She's practiced, and remember, she has practiced the answer as to what she's going to say, and she really delivers it with a lot of confidence.
That's right.
When we had your husband, President Clinton, on this show, he said, I asked him about UFOs and Area 51, and if he looked in it, because if I was president, that's the first thing I do. I go right into those files and see what was going on.
Right.
And he said that he did do that.
Yes.
And that he didn't find anything.
Well, I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah, why not?
Right? And there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Unexplained aerial phenomenon,
Yep,
really?
Yep, UAP. That's the latest nomenclature.
I like the old one. I like UFO. I don't know why.
Well, I think we can use them interchangeably, but I would like us to go into those files and hopefully make as much of that public as possible. If there's nothing there, let's tell people there's nothing there.
What if there is something there?
Well, if there is something there, unless it's a threat to national security, I think we ought to share it with the public.
Well, what if everybody's all hopped up on medical marijuana and everybody gets paranoid? I would love it.
That's why I want more research.
If you share it with me, I'll decide what is the best course of action. I really have my ear to the ground.
Well, I'm more than happy to do that.
Now, the interesting thing about this is that she's practiced the UAP thing. And the UAP is a term that Leslie Kean used in her book, and was used in Britain. And John Podesta did the foreword to Leslie Kean's book. So this is where she got it from. She got it from John Podesta, this UAP thing. But when she's practiced it for 5 minutes, when she finally gets on the show, I guess she hadn't practiced for 5 months, she actually gets it wrong. She calls them unexplained aerial phenomena, and it's unknown aerial phenomena. So she actually messes this thing up. And but you can see the very great confidence she has. She doesn't hesitate. And every question that she's been asked about UFOs, she does not hesitate. She does not stall. She doesn't say, I really don't know what's going on, or I don't know if I can do anything. She's very confident about what she's doing. And John Podesta is also, as you'll see, is very confident in the fact that they know what they're doing, and there's a plan to this whole, what's going on behind the scenes here. Here's the look on her face as she finishes delivering the line. She's very confident. She's memorized the answer, and this is John and Podesta and her. This is all orchestrated. They wanted the UFO question asked, and it finally got asked. In fact, it was asked before that, but they put out this alert to media to ask Hillary about the UFOs September 29th, and it wasn't until Damon Steer from New Hampshire, the reporter in New Hampshire, until the end of December. So they sat and waited for 3 months for somebody to finally ask Hillary about the aliens, because she's not to bring it up, because I'm pretty sure she's only to answer questions. So she gets asked, then the Kimmel Show asks, then Charlemagne, who's on the Breakfast Club in New York City, the morning talk show, asks her the question and actually tells her that he believes he's been abducted, and she doesn't bat an eye at that, and she again answers the question very openly. And I actually produced my book for them on the Clintons, and I detailed what was going on with the email thing, and Charlemagne replied, wow. He was just floored. I guess he didn't realize that this behind the scenes thing, because he actually had Hillary on a couple days ago, and if I'd gotten this to him a day before, he would have asked Hillary about the UFOs again, because he's very good friends with Hillary Clinton, but it happened the day after when I sent him this email after I saw that she was back on his show again. Now here's, again, this is orchestrated. There's an email today. If you look at the WikiLeaks today and you search George Knapp, you'll see an email that appears on WikiLeaks today where George Knapp asks Tom DeLonge, the musician, to introduce him, try to get him a contact with John Podesta. Now, John Podesta, as I said, he says, I like to be part of the cult of non-personality. He doesn't want to be in the camera. He doesn't want to talk. He likes to be behind the curtain and pull the strings. And so he does this interview with KLS-TV. KLS-TV in Las Vegas is, of course, famous for breaking the Area 51 story. George Knapp breaks the Area 51 story. So this is just before the Nevada caucus thing goes on, and he does this interview with the station, and he puts out a message. Later on, he goes to Florida, and I'm very good friends with Billy Cox, and I said to Billy Cox, I said, well, he did this interview with George Knapp. It's pretty close in Florida. Contact Podesta. Maybe you can do a UFO interview with Podesta. And I worked out. I said, like, ask him this, ask him that. And of course, he didn't get a reply from John Podesta. And the reason now, it appears, is that the reason that he did the interview with KLS-TV was that DeLong helped set this thing up, whereas DeLong didn't help Cox set it up. So in that interview, he says very important things. And this is, you see, remember his original tweet that said, once again, I was unable to get disclosure. I tried to convince Bill. I tried to convince Obama. I couldn't convince him. But look what he says to KLS-TV. He said, I've talked to Hillary about that. There are still classified files that could be declassified. And that means that there's a cover-up. If he says there are classified files that can be declassified, there's a cover-up. John Podesta is confirming there's a cover-up. He's been in there. He's been chief of staff. He was the top advisor to Obama. And he's saying there are files that can be declassified. There's a cover-up. But the most important thing he says is, he says, I think I've convinced her. So he couldn't convince Bill. He couldn't convince Podesta or Obama, but he convinced Hillary. I think I convinced her that we need an effort to kind of go and look at it and declassify as much as we can. And that's extremely important, because it comes down to the $64,000 question. Is the president running the show? And John says she looks at it. She doesn't have to go to the evil cabal. She doesn't have to go to the Wizard of Oz. She looks at it and declassifies as much as she can, thinking that he knows the procedure is that the president has the material, and he or she can actually just look at the material and make a decision, and with a stroke of a pen can declassify whatever they want to declassify. And so you can look at it and declassify as much as we can, so that people have their legitimate questions answered. More attention and more discussion about unexplained aerial phenomena can happen without people who are in public life, who are serious about this, being ridiculed. So he basically says, I've convinced Hillary to do it, confirming the fact that he's up to something. I've talked Hillary into doing this, and we're gonna get this thing done, and Hillary's gonna do it. Now, here's an email that comes a couple of days after he appears on this thing, and this is from Eric, March the 5th. I think the interview was on the 1st, and he basically says, I'm proud of your continued effort to disclose the truth of the secret UFO files. And he said, I hope history remembers your undaunting efforts to inform the American public about extraterrestrial visitations. And he goes on, my children are 2, 3, and 5. I hope they grow up with a government that is open and honest about our place in the universe. The knowledge shared with our younger generation can serve as a spark for an incredible human, it goes on. Now, the important thing to that is John gets a lot, because he's known for UFOs. So he does get a lot of UFO where people are talking about, give me all the information on UFOs, or I saw something, or something like that. And very few of them he answers. But this one he does answer. And he basically says to him, thanks for your support. We will keep at it. So after his interview, he confirms to Eric, we'll keep at it. We're going to keep this disclosure thing going. And this is now March of 2016. Now, here's one of the interesting ones. You can see a lot of the people getting dragged into this. The guy on the left is David Tattel, and I didn't realize he's a judge on the U.S. D.C. District Court, Appeals Court, and I think he's blind. I'm not sure, but he is very interested in UFOs. We did not know this until we saw the tweets. And Anne O'Leary, who's you see her on the right there, is an assistant to Hillary Clinton. She writes John, and this is after this, again, after he made this disclosure in KLS-TV. As I was telling David the last time I saw him, the two of you are the biggest believers in ET life, who I know, and I think you'd enjoy talking with one another. I know that neither of you have much time, but I think you'd have a fascinating time discussing it if you ever got together. So she's basically putting John together with this big judge in Washington, D.C., and they should go and talk UFOs. So in behind the scenes, there are people in the campaign and in Hillary's staff who know John's interest and are feeding him articles. And there are an awful lot of articles that are fed to John Podesta where they'll say, have you seen this? And a number of them are on Steve Bassett, where like the Washington Post would do an article and they would send it to John and say, have you seen this? And there's even one article that escapes me which one, but where John actually copies himself. He actually recopies, he emails himself with this article talking about him being the UFO guy running the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now here's the Tom DeLonge story, which is for a lot of people the most important part, and it is a very important part of the WikiLeaks emails. It all comes down to one meeting. Tom claims that he's got these 10 people, and one of them is John Podesta. I know a number of people outside that group, and Tom DeLonge mentions other people. This is my opinion only. There are 4 groups. This is not Tom DeLonge and 10 people. This is a whole group of people who have been marshaled together by a civilian, I believe, in Washington, D.C. John Podesta is playing part. That's why when he was first contacted and given the sales pitch by Tom DeLonge, he said to Tom DeLonge, he said, he didn't say anything. He just said, okay, I'm kind of busy. Call me back in a couple of months. And Tom figured he was totally wasting his time. So he didn't phone John back. And that's when he said, John, after 2 months, he said suddenly there was a flurry of emails in his box. And these are the emails we're waiting for. There was a flurry of emails in my box that said, I'm willing to play the game. I can't remember what the exact wording was. I'm ready to play the game. I'm ready to be involved, something like that. This is of tremendous significance. And I need you to come to Washington. And those are the emails we're waiting for. And it all builds. He does the interview with John in July, and it all builds up to a point in January where he's going to bring in some of his 10 military people. So he has these military people, and there's one email I haven't shown where Tom DeLonge lists all the Hollywood people that are involved. He mentions at one point that he's going to try to bring Steven Spielberg to John Podesta for this meeting in January. It doesn't happen, but he's dealing with a guy out of DreamWorks, Spielberg's group. So you have a media group, you have a military group, and we're going to name some of the military people, and they're mentioned in this coming slides by DeLonge's emails. Then there's a scientific group, and these are the people, from what I've learned, are the people that I've been chasing around for 20 years. These are what are called the Avery. They were involved in the 1970s with Robert Emenegger when they did a documentary in 1970 to get out the UFO information in an indirect way. Bob Emenegger did a documentary called UFOs Past, Present, and Future, which then became a documentary, UFOs That Has Begun, in 1979. And they released a lot of material in that documentary. And these Avery guys, who are intelligence people, scientific people, intelligence people, who have had some encounter with the UFO phenomena in their career, and are very interested in it, and have grouped together with other people who are interested, who have clearances, and they have this little private email chatter that goes on. And at one point, I was part of knowing some of these people, who they were. And I talk about them in a book called UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants. I name a lot of these people, and I believe, personally, I believe that a lot of these people are back involved. They were also involved with John Alexander in the 1980s in a group that John Alexander had, which became known as the UFO Working Group, and also became involved with Bob Bigelow. And Bob Bigelow hired a bunch of consultants to inform about UFOs. A lot of these Avery guys, high-level intelligence, military, not military, mostly intelligence, scientific people, were brought on and were paid as advisors to Bob Bigelow. And now it appears, and I think DeLonge probably contacted these people, and these people are very interested. They're not bad guys in the government. They're just guys who are very interested in the phenomena, and they are also part of this, I believe, part of this game. And then there is the civilian group. There's 2 people that I know in Washington, and there's also John Podesta and probably other people. So there's actually 4 groups. And as I said, there's probably 20 or 30 people that are involved in whatever this thing that's unraveling here is happening. It's not just Tom DeLonge and his 10 people. The importance of the email is that a lot of Tom DeLonge's people actually get exposed. We now know who they are. A lot of people doubted that he had these people. We now know these people existed, and they appear at this meeting. This meeting is set up by, you'll see DeLonge Podesta meeting. The location is a Google Hangout. When it's January 25th, 2016, a critically important day. It was 10:30 a.m. and it actually changes to 12:30 to 1:30. Organizer of the meeting, and this meeting is on UFO disclosure. This is Tom DeLonge's baby. This is getting disclosure, a plan that he has to get disclosure. John Podesta has agreed to play a game. The organizer of this meeting on UFO disclosure is John Podesta. Now, here are the attendees. And this is from an email that was sent by Milia Fisher, who was the assistant to John Podesta. It's addressed to Tom DeLonge, Neil McCaslin, General Neil McCaslin, and Milia Fisher, who is the assistant, John Podesta, Robert Weiss, who is basically the guy running Area 51, and General Michael Carey, who is the assistant of the Air Force Space Command. So these guys are all invited to the meeting, and if you see the write-up by Rolling Stone magazine, they sort of try to evade the implications of this meeting by saying, well, we don't really know if they showed up. Believe me, they showed up. Here's I'll show you in a minute some of the emails that show that these guys actually did show up. Here's Neil McCaslin, who ran the lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for 2 years, where it is rumored the Roswell material went. And according to DeLonge, McCaslin is the main guy who's helping him set up this group of disclosure-type people to get a message across through Tom DeLonge to the American people, and he's one of the people that's coming to this meeting. He's coming because you can see that he actually sends an email to Podesta's assistant. He said, regret my confusion, but I'm looking to clarify the time. Is it 10:30 Eastern time, or is it been converted to Mountain Standard Time from my reception? So he's basically coming because he's trying to get what's the exact time of the meeting. And we also know in the afternoon, after the meeting takes place, Tom DeLonge writes an email to John Podesta in which he says which is McCaslin, mentioned he's a skeptic. He's not. I've been working for him for 4 months. Now, it appears that during this Google Hangout meeting, McCaslin played like he's a skeptic. Oh, I don't really know what's going on or whatever. And so Tom DeLonge says, I just got done giving a 4-hour presentation on the entire project a few weeks ago. Trust me, the advice is already happening on how to do all this. He just has to say that out loud. He has to sort of deny in the meeting to John Podesta that he's skeptical about this thing. He has to say that out loud, but he is very, very aware. As he was in charge of all the stuff, when Roswell crashed, they shipped it to the laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. General McCaslin was in charge of that exact lab up to a couple of years ago. And if you check his bio, that's exactly true. McCaslin did run this lab at Wright-Patterson. And here's DeLonge to Podesta, and this is sort of saying where he wants to bring these people, how this meeting got set up. I received your email from your assistant. From time to time, I would like to get you information that is not appropriate for others to see. And here is one of those times. The ranking general, which is McCaslin, on my committee, has some ideas for a memo. So he is going to actually quote McCaslin on disclosure. And he's going to quote McCaslin saying what the White House has to do disclosure. Here's what you've got to do. General's thoughts. I was thinking a bit more about what the White House memo should say. And this is on UFO disclosure. This is a major general in the U.S. Air Force saying, I was thinking a bit more about what the White House should say. Something like these points to all federal agencies in light of the president's policy on STEM, on science, technology, engineering, and math. Some background on your project. The administration should encourage a favorable public affairs position by all agencies. Appoint NASA. And I'm pretty sure, I think I know who some of the people are. Part of the people that are part of this disclosure thing are in NASA. And he says you have to appoint NASA to lead because this is their job jar. And if no agency is appointed on this UFO disclosure thing, it will simply note and be filed and nothing will get done. So he's saying you have to appoint somebody, and I'm advising the White House appoint NASA to run this UFO disclosure thing and to coordinate all this material with the DOD, Director of National Intelligence, and National Oceanographic and Administration, and some other major players. So here's a general actually in an email to John Podesta, basically saying what the government should do, plans. Now here's Michael Carey, who was the Assistant Space Command in Colorado, and he accepted the invitation. So he was at the meeting. No matter what Rolling Stone magazine said, he attended this meeting. Robert Weiss was also at the meeting. And Robert Weiss, this is very interesting, it's very sort of funny because John Podesta was known as the X-Files man in the Clinton administration. And in a number of articles are written about him, he talked about the fact that in the outside office to his office in the White House, he had all the X-Files paraphernalia all over the tables and stuff like that. So he was known as the X-Files man, and Bill and Hillary Clinton, when he had his 50th birthday, had an X-Files birthday party for John Podesta at the White House. John Podesta would say in one interview, he said, every time X-Files was on, didn't matter what was going on, I went home and watched the X-Files. And that at one point, he actually phoned Area 51 to see what was going on with UFOs. And so now we have a situation where exactly the opposite happens. Robert Weiss, who's the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, that runs the always rumored to run the back engineering UFO stuff, actually contacts Podesta. So it was Podesta contacting Area 51, and now many years later, the Area 51 guy is actually phoning Podesta. He's actually contacting Podesta. And this comes in an email a month after this Google Hangout meeting here's him talking. Here's
I had the rare opportunity to present my ideas to an executive with the Department of Defense who worked in special access programs in an area called Watertown, also known as Area 51. That meeting led to multiple clandestine encounters across the United States, from desert airports to vacant buildings deep within Washington, D.C.
So he's saying that Robert Weiss was the guy that he originally started. He made a contact to Robert Weiss. Robert Weiss agreed to play the game, and he basically helped sent him to a guy who I know who it is in Washington, D.C., and it unfolded from there. He had these different people. So Robert Weiss attends the meeting, the Google Hangout meeting on UFO disclosure, and a month later, Tom DeLonge writes an email, February 26th, to John Podesta, and he says, Mr. Podesta, Mr. Weiss from Lockheed Skunk Works has just emailed me asking if there are any updates. So we have a meeting on January the 25th, and it appears that John Podesta has agreed to do something or look up something. And here now you have the head of Lockheed Skunk Works emailing to ask John Podesta, are there any updates on the January the 25th meeting? So Tom DeLonge says, I'm not expecting much, but if there's anything, I can tell him and the general, McCaslin, however small, I would like to respectfully pass it along. Sorry again for adding another email to your long list of other important emails that already exist. So here you have the head of Lockheed Skunk Works contacting John Podesta for an update on this UFO disclosure. So there's something happening. There's some sort of program that John says, whatever he said, wait, I've got to see how this thing's going to unravel. We'll get back to you. And Weiss actually says, what's the deal? What's going on? Because he wants to know what he's supposed to be doing. Then DeLonge to Podesta. This is the day after. He says, I'm after the Google Hangout meeting, I'm honored to be able to work with you on this with important men like yourself, get some sleep on the campaign trail. By the way, if I can help, I'm happy to do it. And he mentions the fact that he actually met with Hillary Clinton and he campaigned for John Kerry. And he said, I've always loved her, always wanted a female leader. And later on, you actually have emails with John Podesta, contacting the former campaign manager for Barack Obama, Axelrod, and making this thing, can we use him? And John Podesta says, yeah, I think you could probably use him for something on the campaign trail. So they're actually discussing getting him to help campaign for Hillary Clinton. Robert, here's a sort of an unrelated email. It's Brian Deese. He's a senior advisor to President Obama, and these are some of these odd emails that pop up. He's doing some tweeting, and he does a tweet, and one of the emails that goes back to John Podesta is somebody who's reading the tweets, and it's one of the, I think it's one of the secretaries or the assistant says, mysterious was goal number 3. And this is Deese, I think it's in the Washington Post. He's writing these articles. The article isn't about extraterrestrial life, but I thought this phrasing implied the topic without leaning too hard into it, as if one of Podesta's top people is getting indirect messages on ETs through stuff going through the Washington Post. Now we get to the Edgar Mitchell emails, and the end of the Edgar Mitchell emails are that all these emails are approved by Edgar Mitchell, but they're not written by Edgar Mitchell. They're written by other people. And here's some of them. Here's Rebecca Hardcastle-Wright, who's beside Edgar Mitchell, and Terry Mansfield beside her. And these are the two main people who are trying to get a meeting with Edgar Mitchell, with John Podesta, and then with President Obama. And there's an important email that relates to that and how the process works. This is January 14th. This is before Obama leaves the White House, or no, this is a year before. And when he first comes into the Barack Obama administration, they're trying to get a meeting with him. Congratulations on your recent appointment as counselor to President Obama. Now within the Obama administration, you are in a unique position to address disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence in a manner that promotes science, technology, peace. The end of the story is, it doesn't appear they got a meeting. But they were trying to set this meeting up immediately when John Podesta took his position with the Barack Obama administration. And what you'll see in these 17 emails is repeated letter after letter as John moves through these different jobs, trying to get this meeting. And a number of times they were setting up appointments, and then Edgar Mitchell couldn't make it. But they were trying to set it up, and eventually Edgar Mitchell died, and I don't believe the meeting ever took place. This is Rebecca Hardcastle, and she sends her book on exoconsciousness to John Podesta. She said, John, I trust you enjoyed reading Exoconsciousness. And she said, would you like to go for lunch? I feel our conversation would be enlightening for both of us, an opportunity to share. She does a lot of emailing to John Podesta. She lives in Washington, D.C. Here's one. This is the very important email. This is Aaron Sepp, who's replying to Rebecca Wright, and she said, received. Thanks, Rebecca. Sorry for the delay. It's been a heck of a month. Now, here's the important part. She said, what happened was they wanted John to come, or to Edgar Mitchell to come in the middle of August 2014. And so Rebecca sends an email and says, he can't make it. Can we do a 3-way Skype with me, Rebecca, John Podesta, and Edgar Mitchell? So this is the reply to that request, where Aaron says John would likely take this meeting alone. And that means him and Edgar Mitchell. You're not allowed in the meeting. But this is the important part. She said he'll take the meeting alone before involving the president. And this again comes down to the idea, is the president in charge? He says, take it to the president. He's not going to take it to the evil cabal. He's not going to take it to the Wizard of Oz. If this works out, and the discussion is always by Edgar Mitchell, it's on zero-point energy and UFO disclosure. If it works out, he will take the issues to the president, which indicates the president knows what's going on. Here's another thing that sort of backs up the fact that the president knows what's going on. In May, the New York Times, May 10th, ran an article on the Hillary Clinton statements that she was going to disclose. And in their article, the New York Times basically asked, is this going to happen? Is Hillary going to do it? Why is this happening? And it was a straight up piece. There's no little green men in the article. It was a pretty straight up piece, the fact that Hillary was going to disclose. When the New York Times did that article, it was a green light to everybody. And 3 reporters in the White House press corps suddenly started asking very serious questions. What's the deal? Is this classified? Is President Obama going to is he going to release the UFO secret before Hillary gets in? Why is Hillary saying this? And the press secretary, Ernest, actually gets by it because he doesn't have a clearance. He said, I don't have a tab in my briefing book for that. I don't have the clearance. But he says, I know that he, talking about Obama, has jokingly, publicly before that one of the advantages of the presidency is having access to that kind of information. I don't know if he availed himself of that opportunity. And then he says, but you should ask him. It'll be interesting. And he basically says, I don't have the clearance, but the president does. You should ask him. He throws the president under the bus. You ask the president. It'll be interesting. The problem is, the 3 reporters are very serious, and the 3rd reporter, an African-American reporter, actually confronts the press secretary when he starts walking around the question about Roswell and classified material, and by saying, you're not going to get away with this. And the press secretary says to her, you just keep trying. It dies there, and nobody asks Obama after he comes back. He's in the Pacific when he comes back, the question. But this thing almost broke. But it all implied that basically the president does have a clearance, according to the press secretary, and you should ask him these questions about classification and UFOs. The problem is that none of those 3 reporters have asked the president. Now, here we go back to Terry Mansfield. I left a message May 19th. Please let me know when John can talk with Edgar and me on Skype about disclosure and the difference between our contiguous universe, nonviolent ETI. So she said it's more popular than ever. So again, you have her making requests as well. Then they want to talk, here's an email where they want to talk directly with President Obama by Skype for historical purposes while the president is still in office. And then the critically important thing, which I only noticed a little while ago, I'd seen the emails, and that is the deal of consciousness. This is Rebecca Hardcastle Wright writing, and she says, John, Edgar has consulted on consciousness matters for the American presidents in the past. And this is extremely important because this is the basis of the UFO phenomenon. This is potentially one of the reasons they're having a problem with the disclosure is it's not just little aliens from another planet in a little tin can with an anti-gravity engine in it. It's got to do with consciousness, and it's very, very complex. And she's saying Edgar has consulted on consciousness matters for American presidents in the past. I was shocked because I had my download experience in 2012, and I know that consciousness is the basis of this whole thing. And I'm very shocked to see that Edgar Mitchell actually had consciousness discussions with the president, which indicates the president knows more about this than just little green men. Tom DeLonge. When Tom DeLonge talks about going to Robert Weiss at Lockheed and getting in behind all the equipment, he talks about the fact that they had a major discussion on consciousness, that he was told by Weiss that this was the key item. Here's Tom DeLonge talking about consciousness.
We had a discussion for 55 minutes about consciousness. One of the more important things I'm going to share it with you guys this evening is that the UFO phenomenon is tied to consciousness. And for a lot of people, that's going to be very hard to understand because they think it's this hokey pokey, spiritual, interdimensional, like it's whatever your mind goes to, when people say the word consciousness. But what you need to understand is that the universe itself and all things in it contain some very, very interesting properties and life forms. And what the UFO phenomenon is connected to has a lot to do with not only with us as a life form, humanity.
Okay, and so you see the consciousness being brought up with the president. Then you see the head of Lockheed Skunk Works telling Tom DeLonge that consciousness is key.
And guess what? Consciousness is incredible. And guess what? There is a God, but it's not a God that looks like Buddha or has Birkenstocks or whatever. It's, you know, it's an infinite, beautiful energy that connects all of us, that creates stars, okay? That creates galaxies. Like, it's a powerful energy. And that energy is very important. And when humanity figures out how to be more in touch with that, and I don't know how yet. Like, I'm not saying I figured this out. I just know the UFO phenomenon is attached to that subject. And when I was behind machine guns and 4 layers of crazy doors and in a secure facility, that is all the head scientist wanted to talk about.
Now, here's part of the download I got that basically told me consciousness was the key to this whole thing. Robert Weiss is the guy that he's talking to. He said the top scientists are talking about consciousness being key. Ben Rich gave a lecture in 1993 at UCLA. He was the former head of Lockheed Skunk Works. And in that interview, he made the famous statement, "We now have the technology to take ET home. We've discovered the mistake in the equation. It's not going to take a lifetime to do, but it's going to take an act of God to get this thing out of Congress." In the audience that night was Jan Hartson, who's the international director for MUFON. Jan Hartson had a close encounter at 9 years old in his backyard with his brother. He had become obsessed with UFOs, became an electrical engineer, wanted to back engineer and build a flying saucer. And so when he heard Ben Rich saying this, he knew this was his chance. He had to ask Ben Rich how the UFO propulsion system worked. And so after it was over, he took some questions. And as he's heading for the door, Ben Rich, he goes running up to Ben Rich and he said, "Ben, I've been interested in this my whole life. I'm obsessed with the propulsion system. Ben, I need to know, how do they get here? How does it work?" And Ben Rich turned around. He looked at him as if, like, "Who are you?" And he asked him a question. He said, "Let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP?" And Jan Hartson said, "I didn't expect a question." And so he just stumbled around. He said, "It means everything in time and space is connected." And Ben Rich said, "That's how it works." And he turned around, walked away, and got in his car and drove away, and died about 2 years after that. And Ben never revealed anything more, but he basically says the question, what do you know about ESP? Consciousness, non-local consciousness. In 1950, this is the other part of the download I got, and these things all came to me in an instant in 2012, February 26th. The Canadian government in the early 1950s was involved in this. Wilbur Smith was a contactee. He was the guy running the Canadian government program. He went to the United States and through classified channels, he asked the American officials through classified channels, through the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C., what's going on with UFOs, flying saucers. He never used the word UFO, flying saucers. And what he came back with was this famous top secret memo that the Canadian government does not deny, said they do not deny this top secret memo, that it existed, it was for real. Said the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States, rated higher than the H-bomb, which wouldn't be detonated until 2 years after this. This was written in November of 1950. Flying saucers exist. Their modus operandi is unknown, but concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. And the D item is considered to be of tremendous significance by American authorities. The idea that came into my head when I got that download was the very next line in the document. It's very important because in 1950, there is nobody talking to aliens. The contactees, Adamski, Williamson, all these guys would not appear until 1952, a couple of days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb. Betty and Barney Hill's book would not be released till the mid-1960s. There was nobody walking around claiming they were talking to telepathic aliens. But in the very next line, 1950, Canadian government top secret memo, it said, and this popped into my head, "I was further informed that the United States authorities are investigating along a number of lines which might possibly be related to the saucers, such as mental phenomena." And I gather they are not doing too well, since they indicated if Canada's working on anything in geomagnetics, they would welcome a discussion with suitably accredited Canadians. So the Canadians were told by American officials through classified channels, through the Canadian Embassy, that mental phenomena was part of the UFO phenomena long before anybody talked to an alien. How did they know the mental phenomena was part of the UFO phenomena? Just things flying around in the sky. possibly because in 1947, when Roswell was recovered, there was 3 dead aliens and 1 live alien. And that live alien, according to the witnesses that have come forward now, said the alien was talking in their heads. And that's why they knew mental phenomena was part of it. So you have Ben Rich saying mental phenomena is part of this thing. Then you have Wilbur Smith in Canada in 1950 saying mental phenomena. And then the third one was in the book UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants. We spent 8 years chasing Dr. Eric Walker, who's the former president of Penn State University. He's got 14 honorary doctorate degrees. He was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, the top military think tank in the United States. He was an assistant secretary of defense in charge of weapon development in 1950. Friends with Eisenhower, did an engineering study for Eisenhower. Very good friends with Milton Eisenhower, who was the president at Penn State before him. Very, very powerful guy. We were asking him a number of questions over 8 years, and he said, I can't talk about this. I don't talk about this subject. Go study something else. He didn't mention classified, but he said, I can't talk about this. And he would give rhymes and riddles, and he couldn't hang up the phone. And at one point, someone asked him about the MJ-12 group, the control group. And he said, is the MJ-12, is it still just 12 people, and is it all Americans? And Walker cuts him off, and he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy that was doing the interviews didn't have an answer, so Walker answered his own question. He said, look, and he's talking about the MJ-12 group, the control group. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in. Very few people understand it. And that's how it ended. And that was 2 years before Ben Rich would stand up and say the same thing, that mental phenomena was part of it. This is a 1991 interview. So you have a third person saying mental phenomena is part of this thing. And this was in this book that we had done in the Free Study. If you look at the Free Study, and this is important when you get Edgar Mitchell talking to presidents about consciousness, that this is part of this whole disclosure effort, and this is in the WikiLeaks. In the Free Study, it has been revealed when they asked these people who answered the question, 902 people answered, 13% of all experiencers say that the aliens, the beings, whoever you want to call them, let them fly the ship. I first heard about this after I had my download in 2013 in Phoenix. The first woman told me this, that she was flying the craft. I thought she was nuts. I could not believe she was saying it. I had never heard of this before, but 13%, 13.19% of all experiencers say they've flown the ship. And I have now talked to 36 people, and nobody has said anything different. You say, you can cut them off. You say, I'm flying, and you say, hang on, how do you fly a flying saucer? And everybody says the same thing. Nobody says anything different. You use your mind. It's done with telepathy. The ship is alive. You interact with your mind. That's how it works. Like Ben Rich, that's how they get here. It's ESP. It's non-local consciousness. And so that's why it's so important that you have this email where we learn that Edgar Mitchell has been consulting with presidents on consciousness. Now, of all the people, and I've taped some of these people who've talked, I'm going to play the exact 4 minutes. It's a little bit hard to listen to, but this is Chris Bledsoe, who is one of the people who's flown the craft. And since he has flown the craft, once you make this interaction with the craft where you actually fly it and become one with the craft, then you can pick up the craft. You know when the craft is around. And John Alexander has done a number of interviews in the last 6 months where he went to Chris Bledsoe, and Chris Bledsoe accurately predicted, John, there's something coming. And John said, there's no time, second time in my life I saw a UFO, and it was for real. And he picked it up. And he said, once he was able to fly the craft, he was in one with the craft, and he can tell when it's coming. He can tell where it's going to come from and this sort of stuff. So I'm going to play Chris Bledsoe talking about flying the craft, and this is the pedestal that he'll be talking about in this thing. And you can actually hear, and everybody basically says the same thing, how you fly the craft. But here's Chris Bledsoe, because he's very detailed about how this operation, and he's flown the craft a number of times, and you will see how it involves consciousness and the mind.
When I walked up to the craft, from the outside, it's shaped like an egg. And it's faceted, but in the shape of a beehive. Now I'm looking at the outside of the craft. The skin, that's what the skin appears like on a tiny form, real little tiny, like honeycombs. But as it becomes alive, this craft, these honeycombs expand and get bigger. The little ones turn into bigger. Okay, so entering into the craft, there's this round area towards the front, and there's this pedestal that looks sort of like a raised area on this near this console. It's like a pedestal, and on top of it is a beehive, half of a beehive, like half of a basketball size, that size, but not quite round. But it's kind of black carbon fiber texture on the outside, but in the shape of honeycomb. Everything's like a honeycomb, but micro, tiny. But when I laid my hand on it, they showed me to lay my hand on it. And when I did, where my hand was turned into this deep purple violet color, and then it began to change that color. And it went through the purples and blues into the green, and then it got to this aqua color, like an aquamarine. The whole thing lit up, this pedestal. And it all happened in a very quick manner, all in just put my hand on it, pull it away, it cycles colors, boom, it lights up, and then the inside of the glass begin to light up. And that's when I see from the inside the same texture as on the outside of the glass. Millions of little tiny honeycombs begin to glow. Sort of like LED dots. That's how I would describe them. They're tiny. I'm looking at them in small scale, but then they begin to rotate. Each one, they're like mechanical gears. You see it as a connection to the craft. The craft becomes alive, and it turns into this geometric, huge honeycomb shapes. All the little ones are gone now; they're great big, and then after all that startup process happens, all of them, just seconds really, is a part of me. If I look at something and I want to be there, that's where we go, and it keeps you. And then it leads you, it guides you, it's with you. I never seen a stick that you drove it by. It's always been just thought. And I had the greatest time going down the river, just shouting. I can see sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking through the front of the craft, and it's clear as glass. And I'm right down on top of the water, just screaming down the river. I went through the connection process, but it's surreal. The sound, the everything, all happens very quick. But you become a part of that machine. That metal is actually has almost like a soul to it. The craft does. Becomes maybe you into a machine somehow. That's very intelligent.
So now we'll end it by describing the fact that there are still some emails we're looking for, and the main ones that we are looking for are the response when Tom DeLonge, and I had there is an actual audio, but I didn't have time to pull the audio, where he actually describes this process where he contacts John Podesta, and John Podesta comes back to him 2 months later when he doesn't realize that John's going to have anything to do with it. And I think what happened was John had to check, who's this DeLonge guy? Who's he dealing with? What's the plan? How do I fit into this plan? He carefully checked all the angles and then got approval to be part of this group. And that's when, according to DeLonge, there was a flurry of emails that came back to him saying, I'm ready to be involved. This is of tremendous significance, and I need you to come to Washington. So there's maybe 7,000 emails to come. All the emails will be released by the time the election takes place, because it's intended to injure Hillary, so it doesn't help to release them after the election. They'll all be out by next Tuesday, and I'm hoping that these emails will appear, because if you have John Podesta on an email saying, I'm ready to play the game, or I'm ready to be involved in this, and this is of tremendous significance, and come to Washington, then you have an email that even the Washington Post and the New York Times, who are gone back to sleep, will actually find interesting enough to actually pursue it and maybe put some reporters on it and press this story. So thanks you for listening, and stay tuned to my blog site where I update this stuff on my Facebook site, but a lot of people don't have the access. But the blog site, if you Google White House UFO blog, I update the latest disclosures, and I've sort of I'm releasing a book on consciousness. It's called Inspired: The Paranormal World of Creativity, which goes through all sorts of different consciousness things where Nobel Prizes come in dreams, and music comes in dreams, and art and all this kind of stuff. And I've had to sort of delay that, although it should be out next day or two. But I spend most of my time, didn't want to get back into Hillary Clinton and politics and all this kind of stuff, but I sort of got dragged back in to this whole thing by Hillary Clinton saying in 2007 to Damon Steer, when he asked her about the thing in 2007, said, "Oh yeah, I'm interested. I want to get this out. Do you realize that the most requested item at the Clinton Library was for FOIAs was UFOs?" And when I heard that, I went, "Whoa!" Like, you think you're wasting your time, and you suddenly realize that the people in Washington are all actually watching what's going on. They aren't talking about it, but that she actually realized that I filed all these FOIAs, and that sort of dragged me back into it. So I'll be glad when Tuesday comes and I can get back to consciousness and away from the political stuff. But keep an eye on the blog site and Facebook, and hope, like I do, that we're going to get this key email where John Podesta agrees to be part of this UFO disclosure initiative by Tom DeLonge. Thanks for listening.